There's a brand new book out called Take a Sad Song, The Emotional Currency of Hey Jude. And you're thinking, another Beatles book? Why? Don't we have enough? No, you can never have enough Beatle books that are out there. And this one takes a little bit of a different angle. Instead of doing an overreaching history of the group and their personal and professional lives, James Campion takes a look at just one song, and it's Hey Jude. And wow, is there a lot to go through with that song. The book is out now, and James joins me right now. Hey, James, thanks so much for hanging out.
Hey, Eric. Nice to meet you, man.
Great to meet you, too. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you very much.
I'm curious to know, do you think that as a music fan, this is where music journalism could be going or should be going or will be going? Just a lot of a focus maybe on one particular year, or in your case, one song. Your book is amazing. I loved it. And it reminded me of why I loved Mojo magazine, when it took like 16 pages to talk about a weekend that happened in some Beatles life. You know, that's what I want to read. I want a deep dive of everything I need to know about Hey Jude. And I got there with this book. So do you think that this could be where things are going to go?
First of all, thank you for having me, Eric, and thank you very much for your kind words about the book. In regards to what I did, I could speak for myself. I hope so. I'll say I hope so, but it was when I discussed this idea with other authors who had written a book about one song, and other Beatle authors and writers, Beatle historians, other music journalists. One of the things we all came to the conclusion is there are so many really great biographies out there. There is so much work being done in the scholarly pursuits of, the Beatles, that it's almost imperative, if you're going to do something fresh and new, to take a small aspect of it and really concentrate on that and put all your efforts into that. I did this similarly with Kiss. For their album Destroyer, for my book Shout It Out Loud. And I did it. And one of the things that led me to this is I did it in my previous book for Backbeat Books on Warren Zevon's work, Accidentally Like a Martyr, where I took 10 of his songs and 3 of his albums, 13 essays, and tried to formulate a biography of the man through the art. And I thought, okay, let's pare it down even further and do it on one song. So I'm like you, man. I love reading this kind of stuff. Yeah, I loved reading my friend Alan Light's book about Hallelujah. Yeah, Grail Marcus is one of my heroes. I got to meet while working on this book. His book about Like a Rolling Stone, Dave Marsh's book about Louie. So many great books written about one song, and I thought that was so intriguing. But I hope, to answer your question in a long way, Eric, that we do go in that direction, because I want to read those books.
Yeah, because and for people that haven't read the book yet, I think the reason why you and I love this kind of idea is it's not just about the song. It's always about what's happening politically and socially and in the economic world and what's going on with a band dynamic. That's why, Hey Jude is still a great song. Even if you don't know anything about the Beatles and this is the first song that you've ever heard, you'll probably think, wow, it's a pretty long song. How did they get away with all those na-na-nas at the end? But then the more that you find out about their day-to-day lives, you're like, this is a stroke of genius that they were able to do it like this.
Yeah, anything in context for me to look back and to see it with the hindsight of the years, 54 years or whatever it's been, coming up 55 in 2023. But to look at it with that kind of lens is one of my favorite things to do, is to put into context and perspective art. Because one of the professors, and as you know, I interviewed professors of different disciplines, sociology, as you mentioned, musicology, psychology, philosophy, all those things. One of the professors of musicology said, when I teach about Beethoven, I try to teach my students, he was a living, breathing guy who stubbed his toe and got pissed off because he had to pay too much taxes, or, had problems with his in-laws. This is the kind of stuff that excites me. It's like how the sausage is made, how artists navigate their way through history, which is only history to us, but for them, for Paul McCartney, for the Beatles, 1968, this incredible giant year in the history of America, in the history of the world in the 20th century. They were living through it, and they were artists, and they were at the top of their game, and they were commenting on it. And that's why I love Hey Jude so much, because it speaks to all of those things at that particular time. But it does a second thing, Eric. It transcends that time.
Yeah.
We still sing it today. I saw Paul in June of 2022 sing it, and everybody got up and sang it the way he did in 1989 when I saw him. So this thing keeps going, you know?
Yeah. Can you talk about a little bit about what the Beatles were going through and what kind of headspace they were in the day before they were recording? What was being in the Beatles like? How were their relationships towards one another when the song first started to take shape?
That's the greatest question you can ask, because it's about that moment in time. That's what we're trying to circle here, or at least what I was trying to do, and what you were saying at the top of the show. And that is in the spring, late spring of 1968, John Lennon had just left his wife that he had married in the early 60s, Cynthia, and his young 5-year-old son, Julian, for Yoko Ono. He was just consummated that relationship that he had been flirting with for months on end. Paul McCartney, the world's bachelor, had just gotten back from New York, where he consummated a relationship with Linda Eastman, who would become his wife and be with him until she died in 1998. This is happening then. The Beatles, who had somehow plateaued after the triumph of 1967 and Sgt. Pepper's, when they basically took the whole world with them into a new level. Everybody else came up after that. The Hendrixes, the Cream, the Who, so many, the band up in Saugerties. So many things were happening that the Beatles weren't in the middle of the zeitgeist anymore. And they went off to India, and they took some stuff for that, coming back and being like, I'm not sure we really knew what we were doing here. This guy was what we thought he was. That they lost their beloved, manager, Brian Epstein, who pulled them out of nowhere to make them superstars. All of this is going on while the world is in flames. You got Paris riots, you got England and Ireland, you got America with students taking over universities and burning draft cards. You've got more kids coming back from Vietnam dying. And this is what's happening. And then right in the middle of the crazy, long, arduous White Album sessions, in which John pulls Yoko in and says, she's part of this now. And the rest of the Beatles are like, what? And John is starting to dabble in heroin and starting to retreat even further. And they're doing a million takes of, obla-dee, obla-da, and they want to punch each other in the face. Ringo quits the band. Brian, George Martin walks out, their beloved and very seminal producer. All the engineers can't take it anymore. People are just running away from the Beatles,
Yeah.
And now they're stuck together. And this song brings them back. And it brings George Martin back. And it brings Ringo back to the full. And everybody seems to kind of coalesce around this song that they all seem to love. Even John, who was very critical of Paul at the time, called a lot of his music granny, just adored Hey Jude from the second he heard it, until the day he died, said it was Paul's best song. So this is the Beatles who are walking into Trident Studios for the first time, by the way, because they had always recorded at Abbey Road, to record this one single. And it was brought up to me by a couple of people I interviewed for the book. It's the last time all 4 Beatles together walked into a studio to record one song for a single, something they had done in 1962 to record Love Me Do. So it's a cool kind of story of where the Beatles were when they entered the studio to record this song.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up the aftermath of what Paul and John specifically have said what the song was about, or how big it was, or how great it was, or how powerful it was. I remember reading that, for a time, and right up until today, people think it's about Julian Lennon. John thinks it's about their creative relationship. John also said, or Paul said, that it could be underlining, his past relationship that he had. It's amazing that people will put their own emphasis on what the song means and meant to, in the grand scheme of things, depending on whatever editorial stand that they want to take to fit their own needs and their own method. Like John said, like I remember reading a while ago, it was like that Paul wanted to take out the line, "The movement you need is on your shoulder," and John said, "You're not going to take it out," because that's the greatest line, that's the best line of the whole song. So it means so much to people based on what they think the meaning is, based on who you were at the time. And the time that you got asked the question, what do you think the song is about?
which all great songs do, don't they?
Yeah.
All great songs do that. They mean everything and they mean nothing. I
Yeah.
had more people comment on that line than anything else in my book. In fact, I cover it 3 different points, as you know, because you read it. So it's means so much to different people, and you make the best point. You know, John immediately thought, hey, this is about me. Hey, Jules. Hey, Jude. Hey, John. It was first Hey, Jules for Julian. And Julian didn't even know about it until he was much older, that the song was written for him, or inspired by him. And of course, Paul told John, you know, it's kind of about me too. I just met, kind of go out and get her, let her into your skin, let her into your heart. You know, the Beatles had hardened their hearts, you know, when they became famous, towards each other, towards fans in many ways. They stopped touring. They kind of insulated themselves, you know, the drugs and a lot of those things. You know, this is a song that Paul wrote about vulnerability. Feel the pain, feel the love, let it in under your skin. Wow, what a that line always blows me away.
Yeah.
Because you know, normally you hear under your skin is kind of like an irritant, but he's saying let it happen, you know. And it was a tough thing in the late 60s. In the early 60s, is all you need is love, or you know, even a year earlier with all you need is love. But you know what I'm talking about. I want to hold your hand, and this
She loves you. Yeah.
this wonderful upswing of the youth movement. But in 68, it was fracturing, not only politically, as you mentioned, socially, economically, you know, the Vietnam War here in America, and so many other things going on. And the Beatles were, like I said, getting fracturing in their own way. 3 of the Beatles had moved out to the suburbs. Paul was still a bachelor, but kind of wasn't. He was engaged to Jane Asher, but he's falling in love with Linda. So many different things. And Paul managed to get that in the song. And I also mind, as you know, Eric, I also mind the history or the past of John and Paul, and how much losing their mothers as teenagers meant to their relationship with women from that point on, and how they couched their songs. When Paul said in an interview in his early 40s, when I listen to Yesterday now, why she had to go, I don't know, she wouldn't say. I have to think I wrote this about my mother dying, because when she got breast cancer back in the 50s, they would take the woman on, they would try to shelter the kids from the pain of it, and from the reality of it. So one day, you know, Mary McCartney is, you know, fixing Paul's skin knee, and the next minute he's standing over her deathbed. It was an immediate thing for the 14-year-old Paul. So I believe those thoughts seep their way into Beatles songs, and it culminates, I believe, in Hey Jude.
Right. I've got time for one more question, and the time of the song is something that the first time I heard it, it seemed to go on forever, and then I wanted to listen to it again. Talk to me about the actual length of the song, because it seems bizarre now. It seems so bizarre now that like any radio station would have a problem playing a long song by the Beatles, but there was issues with the fact of the length of time that the song actually took.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great stories, and John standing up and saying they're going to play this because we're the Beatles, which is sweet because it wasn't even his song. When George Martin said they'll never play this on the radio, and it was for the longest time until the
All Too Well. Was it All Too
right,
Well?
All Too Well recently, right? But before that,
American Pie.
American Pie, but that was split into 2 sides. So for one side of an actual vinyl record, Hey Jude still has that record. But I think it was Rob Sheffield, I know it was Rob, who was kind enough to put my book actually up for vote for, and it made the most popular
it was
music books,
the best
Rolling
books
Stone
of the
magazine.
year. Yeah, that's pretty great.
I was very, very humbled and amazed by that. And Rob contributed a lot to my book, and he wrote a brilliant book called Dreaming the Beatles a few years earlier. And Rob said, Hey Jude is really underrated in a sense. It was such a provocative, such an arrogant, such an incredible statement by the Beatles. A lot of people underestimate it as this ballad, and it's fun to sing. But what the Beatles did during a time when if you had a song over 3 minutes, you're nuts, or you're Bob Dylan, right, with Like a Rolling Stone, but that made it to number 2, but that's a song that was like an outlier. Here the Beatles are doing an AM hit that was the biggest hit in the world in 1968. It sold more than any other single. It was number 1 in the Billboard charts for the entire year. It was number 1 in more countries, 18 countries. It was number 1 for the longest amount of time than any Beatles song in America. So the length of that song, and the fact, Eric, that the second part of the song, just the nanas, as you mentioned earlier, is longer than the actual song. It's crazy, but only the Beatles could have done that. And I'm a Stones guy, and the great Beatles Stones battle, but only the Beatles could have done this, really, and taken it to number one, really.
Excellent. So what's your plans now? What do you want to do next?
I'm back into writing again. I can't announce it. I feel terrible saying this all the time, but right now I haven't quite formulated the book idea, but it's all circulating around getting the people I want to write about, the band I want to write about, to sort of be involved. And I feel if I can't get them in some way involved, not as partners, I don't think it could be as good a book. So I am working on a new project. I'm very excited about it. And hopefully, again, it'll be published by Backbeat Books. But thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
No problem. Well, look, congratulations on the book again. I enjoyed it immensely. You just dropped a lot of names in there. The fact that I first heard about it because Rob Sheffield, who's a massive Beatles fan, put it on his choice for the best books of the year. And that's a statement, man, that you can hang your hat on that one. Because if anybody knows the Beatles, it's going to be Rob Sheffield. And, don't take my word for it. If any Beatles fans are out there, Rob putting that on the list actually means something. So congratulations again, and we'll talk. Thank you very much. We'll talk soon after the next project. The author
thank you very much,
Take a Sad Song, The Emotional Currency of Hey Jude, and it is out now. Coming up next, Scott Hoying of Pentatonics. He's next. He's got a brand new batch of singles, and they're really, really good. Scott's next on That Eric Alper Show, Channel 167, Canada Talks.